When I woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous.
About the past and about the future.
Welcome back to Draft Vice. My name is Walter, and oh my God, it's free agency 2023 free agency, man. It's here. It's exciting. There's got to have been at least 20, 25 deals that were agreed to today because it is the legal tampering period of free agency. So free agency is technically not started, but has started. They call it the legal tampering period, which is fun. So deals can be agreed to, but they're not official yet. And every year we get at least one or two deals where people back out on them. But as of right now, I'm going to report on the deals that have been agreed to. And then, if they back out, then, sorry, I didn't, this is what was reported. A lot of it now, you get Rap Sheet reporting it, Schefter reporting it. Even sometimes the team accounts reporting it. So I'm going to dive in. I'll talk a little bit about some of the rumors that came out of the day that haven't been fulfilled yet. First off, we found out a little bit about the potential first round, the number one overall pick, some of the other teams that might have been chasing after it. So I'll mention the Titans. And the Raiders were both kind of in talks to get up to that number one overall pick. And that's, I think, a big deal because both those teams are a little bit lower down the draft. And now Carolina managed to get all the way up there. It is interesting. Now, we don't know what they offer. We don't know what was part of the call. But it is interesting that both of those teams were calling. I kind of figured that as well. Whether or not, if you look at what the Raiders did, the Raiders signed Jimmy Garoppolo today, or at least agreed to terms with Jimmy Garoppolo in free agency. So a 3-year deal. I'll talk more about that as I move through today's review of the legal free agency tampering period. But before we get into that, if you want, you can follow the podcast at DraftVice on Twitter, at DraftVice_football on Instagram. You can follow me at BROJO. Death is in the end of life, and punch like a delicious drink you drink in the summer. And and again, like, follow, subscribe, because this should be fun. I appreciate getting back to doing this. So first off, I'm going to jump right into the first team that really blew me out of the water. They only signed 2 players or agreed to terms with 2 players today, but it was 2 really big names personally to me that I thought were a big deal. It was the 49ers signing or agreeing to terms with Javon Hargrave for a 4-year, $84 million deal. He will be added to a D-line that is going to be very intense and hard to deal with. He'll be joining Eric Armstead, Nick Bosa, just a very, potent defensive line, being able to get some real push there, a defense that is already out of its mind really good. Javon Kinlaw has kind of been not as good as they were expecting, but you never know. He could probably bounce back. He's still got time. And sometimes it takes time in the NFL to develop and catch up to the speed. I thought that was a huge deal. I really liked that they signed Javon Hargrave because I always first off, I thought some other team, and there were some other teams that were apparently in the running, including the Cleveland Browns. But yeah, the 49ers make a huge addition that I think will make a huge impact. Just like and I think Hargrave's going to a team that very much matches what he was dealing with when he was with the Eagles, which is, hey, you have other players here who are going to take some of the sweat off of your back, who are going to give you some matchups. He got to go to the Eagles, play with Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham. Eventually, they drafted Jordan Davis. I think that was a very big deal. They also signed Sam Darnold, who, there's a lot of talk about the 49ers and the health of their quarterbacks with Brock Purdy, Trey Lance, both of them coming off of injuries. Purdy with the UCL, and he's just getting done with surgery, and Trey Lance with his ankle and all the stuff that went on with that. So, it was kind of pertinent that they brought in a third quarterback, and Darnold, I think, is a very interesting one because I think there's a lot of upside there. A lot of athleticism there. They have people in the building who have some familiarity with him, especially with Christian McCaffrey being there and having played with Sam Darnold. So, again, I think Darnold is going to be an interesting, if he gets to play under Shanahan, that could be a really big redevelopment deal for him, even if he doesn't get to play. Sitting there learning and kind of getting to see the lay of the land. He's a guy who's still really young in his quarterback career in the NFL. I know he's been in the NFL for a while, but he was drafted really young, so he's a guy who could bounce back in a year or two as maybe a fringe starter for somebody else or somebody who could be taking a flyer on. But again, I kind of just I just like that for the Niners. I like it for Sammy Darnold. And let's move on. The Patriots, they re-sign cornerback Jonathan Jones. He gets a 2-year deal. I have a huge Excel spreadsheet here. Raekwon McMillan signs for a 1-year deal, $1.6 million. I think getting to keep Jonathan Jones, big deal on maintaining part of that defense. Broncos were very active in free agency. Right off the bat, they again come to an agreement with Ben Powers, guard from the Ravens, on a 4-year, $52 million deal with $28.5 million guaranteed. They really invested into the O-line, into the blocking, because they also signed a deal or agreed to terms with Mike McGlinchey, formerly of the 49ers. He is getting a 5-year deal worth $87.5 million with over $50 million guaranteed. So that's a very big deal. But again, I think they kind of needed it. If you know anything about Sean Payton, you've seen his teams before. Offensive line is usually a heavy investment. When he was when he was down in New Orleans, I think that's going to be a big deal with him in Denver as well. And again, they've already invested in 2 offensive linemen in free agency. I wouldn't be shocked if there's another signing somewhere down the line with a center, or if they draft a center in this draft. They also agreed to terms with Jared Stidham, 2-year, $10 million deal. I'm not against it or for it, but I thought it was a fine deal. It feels very pricey for a 2-year, $10 million for a backup quarterback who I don't think is going to really win you a ton of games. But again, it depends on your opinion. He got to watch him, play for the Raiders this year, so on his couch, so that was fun. Broncos are also giving tight end Chris Manhertz a 2-year, $6 million deal. Includes $3.34 million guaranteed. Manhertz is a very good blocker. Has been around the NFL for a little bit. Has some familiarity with Sean Payton down in New Orleans. They also re-signed Alex Singleton, and they signed defensive end Zach Allen on a 3-year, $45.75 million deal, which included $32.5 million guaranteed. I think that was a good deal. Their familiarity with Vance Joseph's defense. He's a guy who's coming in. They're losing Draymond Jones, who signs with the Seattle Seahawks. There, I got that out of the way. I'll talk maybe a second about that contract later on. Who, again, the big deal that they're losing him, but they bring in a guy who can kind of fill in that role, fill in that need, and he was a very big part of Vance Joseph's defense in Arizona. Now he gets to join up with the Broncos. Bears were also very, very active in free agency, although maybe not as active as some people thought, or they at least didn't get the players that people thought they were going to be going after, like Javon Hargrave and Mike McGlinchey. They went to the Broncos and the Niners, but they did get some other interesting players. In fact, the first deal that was announced was TJ Edwards to the Bears. I think that was I don't know if I have it on here, shockingly. 3-year deal. They could average $6.5 million a year, so it was a very good deal. They also signed Tremaine Edmunds to a 4-year, $72 million deal that included $50 million guaranteed. It's the largest 4-year contract for an inside linebacker in the NFL, so they get 2 inside linebackers to be a part of Eberflus's scheme. They also added Nate Davis from the Tennessee Titans, 3 years, $30 million. They also signed DeMarcus Walker, formerly of the Titans, defensive lineman. So they are slowly but surely pulling together this defense. And outside Tremaine Edmunds, all these deals have been pretty reasonable. It sounds like they're being frugal with their deals. I know everybody's going to react to the Tremaine Edmunds deal and just be like, they're blowing their money. They're spending everything. They're being crazy. And now I've also seen people go the other direction and act like they're going to win in the, they're going to they should be the favorites of the NFC North. I saw somewhere, and I think that's going a little too far for two linebacker deals, and a guard deal. Those are not high value positions in the NFL typically, but I also think that this could end up being very good deals for them. We will see. We'll see how it pans out. But both the linebackers and Nate Davis have played really well. DeMarcus Walker's coming off a really good year from the Titans, so I think I actually like what they did. I'm not knocking it. I just thought it was very weird when I saw people going like, I saw one person, I think it was Cynthia Furlan, who was like, they should be the favorites in the NFC North. I'm like, that's a little much. But I didn't mind. Like, I like those deals. I think that they're slowly building. We'll see some more deals come down the line. We'll see who else they come to terms with, who they agree with. And again, remember, none of this is actually official till Wednesday, so things can change. But those were smart, frugal deals outside of the Tremaine Edmunds deal. Washington Commanders, they signed offensive lineman Nick Gates, who's coming off a broken fibula, joined up with the Giants, came back, played pretty well. So, again, they get a solid interior offensive lineman. They also signed Chiefs right tackle Andrew Wiley to a 3-year, $24 million deal. Commanders are really trying to go ahead and fix their offensive line, but at more of a discounted rate, right? Like, they're bringing in a center from the Giants. They're bringing in a right tackle from the Chiefs, both who have played okay, but they're not stellar. They're not like top of the market guys. So they're getting some discount deals on some things, and that might be a smart move depending on how they feel about those players, how they feel about them in their scheme. They also signed linebacker Cody Barton from the Seahawks to a 1-year fully guaranteed deal. I don't have the rest of the details on that yet. They also claimed Cameron Dantzler off waivers from the Minnesota Vikings. And now I'm going to be talking about the Falcons. Falcons had a very interesting day. Started out with a trade with Jonnu Smith coming from the New England Patriots. Who signed a deal with them 2 years ago, has some familiarity with Arthur Smith, formerly with the Titans. He was there with the Titans when Arthur Smith was the offensive coordinator. I think that was a pretty good deal to trade for him. They traded a 2023 7th-round pick. They get Jonnu Smith. Now they have two very athletic tight ends, with Jonnu Smith and Kyle Pitts. So they add a little bit to the offense. They already have a few guys there already. They also came to terms with David Onyemata. I think this was the bigger deal going into free agency, was shoring up that defense, right? D tackle, formerly of the Saints, they signed to a 3-year, $35 million contract, or at least agreed to terms with him on it. Part of today's news was that they extended Chris Lindstrom on a 5-year, $100 million deal. Very big news. Again, he was a first-round pick for them a few years ago, drafted in the same draft as Caleb McGarry, who's currently a pending free agent as well. But again, I think he was a bigger deal that they retained him because they traded back up into the first round to get Caleb McGarry. Lindstrom's been pretty good for most of his rookie contract, so it feels like they're kind of like, hey, listen, we're going to go ahead and extend this to you because we think you've done very well for us and we like how you've played. McGarry only had really the last season that he looked really good, and that's why they even turned down his 5th-year option, so I think they didn't feel as comfortable bringing him back. We'll see what his market is, too. They also agreed to terms with Jessie Bates, the Bengals safety, 4-year, $64 million deal that includes $23 million in the year one and $36 million in the first 2 years of the deal. So this is all stuff that's been reported. I don't have personal knowledge. I'm not a reporter. These are all kind of things that have been reported by Ian Rappaport or Adam Schefter. But I do think that that's a big deal that, they went ahead, they brought in a safety who's going to, they had Richie Grant, who they drafted a couple years ago in the 2nd round. He's been fine, but I think they needed a free safety to kind of come in there, to pair up. Like, their safety room's not been great. This allows them to kind of play a little bit more, open up their coverage a little bit. And again, they've been pretty good with some of the deals that they've been giving out. They have AJ Terrell there. He's played really well. This opens up a lot of the options they have on defense. Remember, the last 2 years for the Falcons have been basically trying to get out of really bad contracts, and now they finally had a little bit of money to spend and to really get to build this team the way they want to. They no longer have Matt Ryan. Right now, it feels like they only really have Desmond Ridder after they released Marcus Mariota. It didn't sound like he was coming back anyway. They also signed linebacker Kaden Elliss. Again, they had another Saints player. Just feels like they're poaching Saints players right now. So yeah, that was, again, they keep on adding to their team. Lions signing Cam Sutton once the free agent window starts on Wednesday. They've agreed to terms with Cam Sutton on a 3-year deal worth $33 million, with $22.5 million guaranteed. Sounds like the first 2 years are basically fully guaranteed, but again, it's $11 million a year for a corner. This was a team that needed to fix up their back end of their roster to kind of get better on the back end. A lot of talk about them possibly drafting a corner in this year's draft. Safeties, all those those, because the front end looks really good, but I think there's going to be a lot of talk this year about safety and corner for the Detroit Lions. The Panthers came to terms with Von Bell and Shy Tuttle. They've agreed to a 3-year, $19.5 million deal that includes $13 million guaranteed. This was Adam Schefter because he even cites the agents on it, so that's how you know it's Adam Schefter. And Von Bell is also apparently going to the Carolina Panthers, former safety from previously the Bengals and before that even the Saints. They also re-signed Bradley Bozeman to a 3-year, $18 million contract. We'll talk about center market in a little bit, but both two of the top free agent centers both returned back to their teams. Ethan Posick and Bradley Bozeman, both on 3-year deals that were relatively cheap compared to what I thought the market was going to give them. So kind of a good situation for both of those teams that got to re-sign their guys. Ethan Posick went back to the Browns. Bradley Bozeman went back to the Carolina Panthers. Carolina Panthers are going to get their core 5 guys back who played last year. Now, granted, 2 of their guards are coming off of ACL tears, so we'll see how quickly they get back. But they have both their tackles in Moton and Ike Ekwonu. They'll have Bozeman, and we'll see how quickly Brady Christensen and Austin Corbett come back off of their ACLs. Raiders, I already mentioned, they've agreed to terms with Jimmy Garoppolo on a 3-year, $67.5 million deal that includes $34 million guaranteed. This is, I think, a big deal because I think, first off, I don't think the differential between Derek Carr and Jimmy Garoppolo is that much. The only real difference is that Derek Carr is available most of the time. I think that is a big difference. But I also don't think the differential on their play is that different. I think Jimmy Garoppolo plays almost as well as Derek Carr a lot of the time when he is healthy. I think, if you put the right team around him, you can win with him. You saw that with the 49ers this year even. His problem's always been health. That's why he's not coming at top market prices. He's coming at $22.5 million a year. I would be shocked if the Raiders are done looking at quarterback, whether they bring in a backup free agent. Like I mentioned before, they were one of the teams that was in the talks of trading up to the number 1 pick. Maybe they trade up to number 3 if they really like Anthony Richardson or Will Levis. So we will see what ends up going on there, but Jimmy Garoppolo goes to one of the teams that we knew he had some familiarity with. I think it's a very solid deal because if Jimmy Garoppolo plays most of that contract, he'll be, then you're getting a really good value. You're getting him at $15 million less than what you'd be paying Derek Carr, which I think is significant. Granted, you're paying that extra $15 million probably to a high-end backup somewhere too. But still, nonetheless, it's a good deal. And if you're using him as a bridge quarterback, it allows you to trade up, get a guy, and not play him right away, especially if it's somebody like Anthony Richardson. Be interesting to see if Josh McDaniels trades up and gets another Florida State quarterback. I do think I got to pull down to see what other. I think that was. Oh, and they also are signing Marcus Epps to a 2-year, $12 million deal. Formerly of the Philadelphia Eagles, worth $12 million, $8 million guaranteed, so $6 million on average per year. So and really it's a 1-year, $8 million deal if they want to get out of it. So they're not totally tied to him if they don't really want to. I think that's a pretty solid setup. Epps played pretty well. They're also signing Colts corner Brandon Fison. Again, that's more of a backup kind of guy. So spending the early parts of free agency correctly. The Chiefs last week or during the weekend had released Frank Clark. Well, a lot of talk about maybe they bring back Orlando Brown. We already talked about their tackle who signed with the Commanders. Well, they also just signed or are agreeing to sign Jaguars offensive lineman Jawan Taylor. Played right tackle this year. He's developed pretty well as a solid pass blocking right tackle. It's a 4-year, $80 million deal that includes $60 million guaranteed. That's a lot of money. Also, there's a lot of talk right now that they are going to be swapping him over to left tackle. The Chiefs also have Lucas Niang in the building. Lucas Niang was a guy who's kind of had some health issues in the past, especially when he was coming out of college. So, you still want to shore up parts of that offensive line. But again, this was why the Chiefs very heavily have invested the last few years on the offensive line. If they are asking Jawan Taylor to swap, you got to realize Jawan Taylor's played his entire NFL career at right tackle and most of his college career at right tackle. He did play about 100 or so snaps at left tackle in college, but pretty big deal. It does sound like the Chiefs are moving on from Orlando Brown, according to Ian Rappaport. So I think that was a good deal for them, especially if Orlando Brown was wanting more money than that. And actually, he might be a better pass blocker than Orlando Brown. Granted, Orlando Brown on the left side and him on the right side. There might be a transition if you have to swap Jawan Taylor to the left side. Let's talk a little bit about the Texans. Texans did a lot of what the Texans have been doing the last 3 years under Nick Caserio, which has been sign a lot of really cheap deal free agents to 1 or 2 year contracts and see what you can get out of them, which I thought that might change with the D'Amico Ryans maneuver, but I guess not. They signed Case Keenum to a 2-year contract to be the backup for the number 2 overall pick, or maybe the bridge quarterback. We'll see what happens. They signed Chase Winovich to a 1-year, $2.5 million deal, formerly of the Patriots and the Browns. And when Chase Winovich played for the Patriots, Nick Caserio was there. In fact, I think Nick Caserio was part of the front office that drafted him. They also signed Mike Boone, formerly of the Broncos, Hassan Ridgeway, formerly of the 49ers, to a 1-year, $4 million contract. And they're expected to sign defensive back Jimmy Ward, again, another 49er player, following D'Amico Ryans down to Houston. I know there's always been a lot of talk about maybe some of these players might follow Robert Saleh to the East Coast. You got to realize Texas is way closer, so Jimmy Ward going down to Texas kind of makes a little bit more sense. A lot of these players don't like leaving too far from their home. Bills made a surprising free agent move. I'm not too surprising, but at least it was a move. That was kind of the more shocking thing. They signed one of the Connor McGoverns. There's 2 of them. This is the one that they're going to be signing, I believe, to play guard because they have Mitch Morse. They're signing him from the Cowboys, the one that was on the Cowboys, not the one who was on the Jets, to a 3-year. I believe. Oh, I can't see the number on this. Hang on one sec. $23 million deal. That's not bad, right? For a solid guard to be pulling in. So that's really the only move I'm expecting from the Bills as far as free agency go. They're not usually huge in free agency early on, but it is good they decide to add on to their interior offensive line. It's been a problem for a couple of years now, and eventually you have to learn to adapt to eventually correct your mistakes. And speaking of correcting mistakes, here comes the Cleveland Browns on the list. Cleveland Browns, I'm going to talk about the most recent signing first because I think it's actually the biggest signing that they'll probably make in free agency, which is Dalvin Tomlinson, D-tackle, initially drafted by the Giants, then went to the Minnesota Vikings, going to be 29 years old. But he is going to be joining the Browns on a 4-year, $57 million contract. I do think the Vikings were hopeful that they would get him back. Very solid run defender. Which is important for the Browns because they have not been good at defending the run at all, especially the last 2 years, especially last year. Last year, they were horrible at stopping the run. They couldn't stop anybody's runs, and that was kind of a huge problem for that defense. It's why Joe Woods is not there anymore. It's why I think quite a few people are not there anymore. But Dalvin Tomlinson being there, it seems to be a maneuver away from I think a mistake on the personnel front because I think they needed to bulk up at D-tackle earlier than this, especially last year, but I think they kind of knew last year that it was a little bit more of a punt year, see what they can get out of some of the cheaper guys. They also are going to sign Ogbonnia Okoronkwo, 3-year deal with $19 million, with a chance to make up to $22 million, and he gets $12.5 million guaranteed. He's going to be kind of a rotational rusher across some Myles Garrett. See, how some of the younger guys kind of rotate in as well. They lost Javen and Clowney. It doesn't sound like he'll be back. So with that in mind, they brought in a guy who's going to be a rotational rusher because they don't have Clowney, and maybe Ogbonnia Okoronkwo will be, an improve. I don't know if he'll necessarily be an improvement over Jadeveon, but at least you'll have a guy there that you could stick in there. I think this is going to be their plan of trying to take some shots at rotating guys in on that defensive line, not having to rely entirely on just one dude at each spot or two guys at each of the spots. But so now they've tied up a lot of money in two guys that they're bringing in, with $7 million going to Obo and another average of like $14 million going to Dalvin Tomlinson. And remember, they always have Myles Garrett. They have a lot of young guys there, we'll see what ends up happening. Their D tackle room has not, they've drafted a few guys in the 3rd and 4th round. We'll see if they draft anybody this year as well. But we'll see what ends up happening with them. They did actually, this was another one of the teams that brought back one of their own centers, like I said before, another 3-year deal for Ethan Posick. They bring back Sayon Taki on a 1-year, $2.5 million deal. The Buccaneers bring back Jamal Dean, who's somebody I don't think they were expected to bring back, defensive back corner, 4-year, $52 million deal. Remember, the Buccaneers are moving on from a lot of players this year, so it was a little shocking that they brought back a guy on a big contract, but not too shocking because you got to remember, Jamal Dean's not that old. If it's only 1 year of kind of a restart for the Buccaneers, as they maybe bring in like a bridge quarterback or try to have somebody compete with Kyle Trask, this could be one of those methods of getting a little bit of a correction, keeping like some talent on that team, and they are already kind of clearing out cap space on other spots on that team. Wasn't any, again, there's a little bit of a rumor going around. They might try and trade Shaq Mason. We'll see what ends up happening. That should clear about $9.8 million in cap space. The Giants have agreed to terms with Raheem Nunez Roches, defensive tackle. Again, the choices by the Giants have been very interesting this offseason. They're bringing back Matt Breida. They're also signing Bobby Okereke, formerly of the Colts, to a 4-year, $40 million contract. That's an interesting one. I mean, again, like as far as linebacker contracts, we already saw Tremaine Edmunds' contract be quite more than that. So it's a mid-tier linebacker contract, but I think that was pretty good. I'm not really all that worried about it. That their linebacking room had nobody last year. Now they have somebody, and probably for a pretty solid deal as well. Titans agreed to terms with Andre Dillard. This is the former first-round pick for the Philadelphia Eagles, who kind of never hasn't really started for them for the most part, but has been a very solid high-end backup for them as Jordan Mailata took over as the starter at left tackle. Still, it's a 3-year, $29 million deal for Andre Dillard. We know the Titans have moved on from Taylor Lewan, as well as a lot of other players. Also to mention, Robert Woods signed with the Houston Texans, another player that the Titans moved on from. The former first-rounder gets a chance to play in Tennessee with Andre Dillard. The Vikings agreed to terms with two different players. First, Josh Oliver on a 3-year, $21 million deal. He gets $10 million guaranteed. This is a tight end. Used to be on the Ravens. A very solid blocker. Again, I think they're looking to move to a lot more 12 personnel system, kind of like the Kubiak run of that scheme, and how sometimes McVay runs a little bit more 12 personnel as well, which O'Connell has kind of been familiar with a few of those people as well in the past. And they also are signing pass rusher Marcus Davenport to a 1-year, $13 million deal. It sounds like they'll be moving on from Zadarius Smith, who I think wanted to be out anyway. So now they bring in Marcus Davenport, who's younger, has a little bit more upside, Maybe they can get an extension again next year. So 1 year, $13 million, not that big of a deal. Plus, again, a dude, if they don't keep him around, they could always let him walk and get a comp pick for him. So I think that was a pretty solid deal. The Steelers agreed to a 2-year deal with Patrick Peterson, $14 million. I thought that was a little weird because Patrick Peterson was talking about wanting to join a contender. I guess this is the closest he can find was the Steelers with Kenny Pickett and Kenny Pickens. All the fun going on over there with the Steelers. That was the only real move that the Steelers did today. The Chargers are possibly signing linebacker Eric Kendricks. He was just released from the Minnesota Vikings. And Jameis Winston agreed to stick around with the Saints. We also talked a little bit about Draymond Jones signing a deal with the Seahawks, and then Matt Gay is signing a deal with the Colts, formerly of the Rams, 4-year, $22 million contract. The only move that I've seen so far of the Colts today. And that wraps up the free agency review of today's moves. Be very interesting to see what else comes out of tomorrow or even tonight, because you never know what's going to end up happening overnight. Was a little bit of talk that the Broncos might be moving on from some wide receivers. Heard it before about Cortland Sutton possibly being on the trade block, but they are shopping the wide receivers, but they want good draft capital, so they might not officially. It sounds like they're not moved to sell them, but if they can, get something for KJ Hamler, Jerry Jeudy, or Cortland Sutton, they might try it. Nonetheless, it's been a fun day of legal tampering. We'll see if one of these deals falls through. We'll see what ends up happening tomorrow. There was a couple of teams that didn't do anything. Cowboys didn't sign anybody. The Ravens didn't sign anybody. In fact, the Ravens released Calais Campbell. That's kind of doing something, I guess. I don't believe I don't think the Cowboys did anything. There's a few teams that didn't do anything today. But yeah. If you want, you can follow the podcast at DraftVice on Twitter, at DraftVice_football on Instagram. Like, follow, subscribe, and follow me at BROJO. Death is in the end of life. Punch, a delicious drink you drink in the summer. And follow on the TikTok, too.
We're on the
Bye.
When I woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous.
About the past and about the future.